So we've probably all experienced this. You get a message on Vinted, the buyer asks the measurements, the conditions, lots of questions, is it still available, says they're interested. You spend your time answering all these questions and then nothing. They completely disappear. So are these potential Vinted customers being rude? Or are there other reasons why they just suddenly ghost you? So hi, my name is Gemma. Me and my fiance James run a business where we sell luxury and vintage items online, and we like to share our experiences, how we go about doing it, and everything that we kind of learn along the way. And obviously we really like having these kind of discussions with people, because I do find the sort of buyer psychology, not just with Vinted but with anything that we buy and sell online, really interesting. So that's why I thought today's video would be a really good idea, because I'm pretty sure this has happened to probably the majority of us. So when we're talking about ghosting a seller on Vinted, there are definitely different levels of being ghosted, and again, we've probably all experienced these different levels of it. I know we have. So your first kind of one, which isn't too bad I don't think, is when they ask a question like, is it still available? What are the sizes? What's the condition? What are the measurements? That kind of thing. You answer them and you don't hear anything from them. So a lot of us probably get questions like that. I don't think that's too bad, but again, obviously you're spending your time answering the question. So even just a little reply of thank you would probably be quite nice. Next kind of level of ghosting that I know we've experienced quite a lot is where we get messages about offers. So we don't actually get sent an offer, we get a message saying, will you accept X amount? And then if we say yes, but obviously we need to get them to send an offer, or we can send them an offer. And then after that, again, we don't hear from them. So yeah, that's kind of the next level, which I do think is a little bit trickier, because obviously they're showing maybe a little bit more interest, and it can be a little bit confusing, obviously from a seller's point of view. And then obviously you've got where you do actually send them an offer, or they send you an offer, and then you don't hear from them. And then so the next kind of level of ghosting, which I think is quite frustrating, because you're kind of thinking, oh great, I'm going to sell it, is when they accept an offer. So you send them an offer, they accept it, or vice versa, they send you an offer, they accept it, and then they just don't pay. And we've had that happen quite a lot on Vinted. Do you know where we've actually had it happen a lot, and it is quite frustrating? It's on Vistari. Like we've actually got our items listed there. We haven't sold anything on there. However, we have had quite a few offers where we've accepted the offer, so it's not even been coming from us, it's been coming from customers. We've accepted the offer, and they have like a day or whatever to pay, and they never ever buy it. So yeah, it's quite frustrating, because you do think you're like right on the edge of having a sale, and then it just never goes through. So yeah, it's a little bit frustrating from obviously the seller's point of view. And then the next level of being ghosted, which I do find really quite frustrating, and it's actually something that just happened to us, I want to say last week, is when someone will message you, ask a lot of questions, ask you to reserve it for them. So obviously on Vinted you can reserve an item for a particular buyer, so it has their like name attached to it, it's not just marked as reserved. So you reserve it for them, and then they never ever come back for it. So that actually happened to us just a few days ago, and obviously you can't have it reserved indefinitely. I think there's a 5-day limit on Vinted for having it reserved, but they'd actually said to us they wanted to reserve it until a certain time, and when it got to that time I just said, look, nope, sorry, we're putting it back up, because it was an item that was getting quite a lot of interest. And yeah, so I do find that quite frustrating, because obviously it's preventing you from selling that item. And even just a quick message to kind of say, oh, I find ones elsewhere, or I don't need you to reserve it anymore, or I'm not interested anymore, it's totally fine. So yeah, that can be a little bit frustrating. I do actually think that's probably maybe the highest level of being ghosted. So now we're going to talk about some of the reasons why customers do this, because there is quite a few different reasons, and some of them I do think are quite genuine. There's nothing really wrong. I think just a little bit of more of communication would probably be helpful. But even just from a seller's point of view, I think if we know this and they're not going to take it as personally when we do get ghosted. So the first reason is that they were never really intending on buying that particular item from you anyway. So they're probably browsing, they're probably comparing different sellers' items that are all similar. They're maybe looking for a particular thing, and they're maybe thinking, right, I've got these 3 here, right, I'm going to ask all of the sellers potentially about the condition, about the measurements, about, you know, all these different things to help them make a decision. So they're still at the browsing stage. They're not really at the, oh, I want to know about this particular item that you have and I really want to buy it. They're still kind of like window shopping. So I do think that could be a reason. I mean, for all we know, from a seller's point of view, they've maybe messaged about 10 to 20 different sellers for that particular item, and they're maybe losing track of who they're messaging, and they're maybe just kind of responding to the people that get back to them the quickest, or that get back to them with the best price or whatever. Obviously we don't know the scenario, so I do think that counts for a lot of the times that you've been ghosted, if you've been asked for like measurements, or if you've been asked for the condition or the material, you know, sort of quite a generic question. And this actually makes quite a lot of sense if you watch my previous video about why buyers favourite lots of things but they don't actually buy them. It's one of the reasons is because they're probably comparing them. So this is where they might contact the seller as well, and then once they've got their answer they kind of move on. And especially if it's an answer that they're not saying that they don't like the answer, but it sort of confirms to them it's not what they're looking for. So once you've answered their question and just say the sizing's not right, or the colour's not right, or the material's not right, whatever, then it sort of confirms to them that that particular one's maybe not right for them, so they just move on. And I think we spoke a lot about in the videos previously, buyers are lazy. And I'm not saying this to be nasty to, you know, customers. I'm the same, everybody's the same when you shop online. Time is precious, so a lot of people cannot be bothered, you know, continuing the conversation. And I know that's quite horrible to hear from a seller's point of view, because manners, you know, cost nothing. You know, personally me, I would always even just say thank you if they've given me the information. But yeah, a lot of people are quite pressed for time and they don't maybe think it's rude, and they just kind of move on. So they don't, you know, they don't owe us anything, put it that way. So yeah, I think that's, you know, something that's maybe quite hard to sort of get used to. And, you know, because a lot of people maybe do take it a little bit personally, but if they're not like that, obviously, as I said, I'm not like that, but I think we are getting better at not taking it personally when people do ghost us. So another reason that a buyer might ghost you is they've found a better version of it somewhere else. So when, you know what it's like when you go on Vinted, you're scrolling through your feed, you find a few items you like, you favourite them, you might, you know, contact the seller, a couple of the sellers, but as soon as you've found the one that you want, and as soon as you've bought that thing, you come off the app. So even if the other sellers message you back, answer your questions, really, are you going to go back on and spend the time to answer them? I know a lot of customers won't. As I mentioned before, they don't really owe us anything, they're busy, or they don't feel like it's rude, so, you know, they don't really feel the need to come back on and say, oh, I found one elsewhere. They've achieved their goal. They've bought that thing they were looking for, they found the one they wanted, they've bought it, and they're gone. So yeah, I think that's another reason why you may be ghosted, is they've just found, you know, a better one elsewhere. And this could be for a variety of different reasons. It could be a better price for them, it could be the exact right colour, the exact right size, better condition. Could even be like going back to some of my previous videos where I talked about how important it was to have like clear photos and things like that, and really good descriptions. Might be the exact same one as what you have and the same price, but if they found a listing elsewhere where the photographs are clearer, they show more details, and maybe the description's more detailed with measurements and things, they'll probably buy that one because there's less questions. Like, as I said, I mentioned this in a previous video, you want to try and reduce the amount of questions that a potential buyer might have when they're looking at your item. So another reason why a buyer might ghost you is that if they have asked you a question and you've answered them, whatever the answer was that you gave them has changed their mind, has made them decide that that's not the right item for them. Now, this is not a bad thing, so I want to make that really clear, that like, just because, you know, whatever answer you've given them, whether it's to do with the colour, the size, the measurements, the condition, the material, whatever, the branding, whatever questions they might have, you want to be really clear and really, you know, upfront with your buyers. So I think I mentioned again in a previous video, I can't remember which one it was, I think it was just the last one, where I mentioned about how to sort of make your listings very clear. You want to deter the wrong customers. You don't want to be selling things to people that people are not going to be happy with, because then you're going to end up having problems later, whether it's to do with complaints, whether it's to do with them wanting to refund something, or even if they just get the item and they feel like, oh, that actually wasn't what I wanted, that wasn't quite the colour, or oh, the measurements are a bit off, the size is a bit off, that's not quite what I was looking for, and maybe they don't, leave a bad review or say anything to you, but they're probably not going to come back. So that is what you want to do. You want to be deterring the wrong people, the people who are not your right customers, and that means by answering their questions, obviously, honestly, as you possibly can, and making sure that they're only buying from you if it's right. So obviously, you don't want to be trying to get like sales from everybody that are not the right customers, because as I said, you could end up with problems such as complaints and things. So yeah, being transparent might lose you a few sales in the short term, but overall it'll help you find the right customers, only sell your items to the right customers that are genuinely going to be happy with what they've received. They're going to feel like they can trust you. They're going to feel like, that they can trust what your photographs and your listings and everything are saying. And, you're going to end up with happier customers overall. Now, I think I mentioned this before in previous videos. This is something that we are, really trying to work on by making our photographs, making sure we've got photographs that are from all different angles, we're not missing any angles, that our descriptions are very clear, that our descriptions have got, even a couple of places, especially if you've got an item that has something missing or a mark on it or whatever, that you've got in it saying, where the marks are or what the marks are or whatever. We've actually been adding in this little part to our listing, which kind of highlights a little, almost like telling them what to do, which you might feel like shouldn't have to do that. But we've had issues before, well, I'm saying issues before, I think we've had maybe 1 or 2 issues before where the customer clearly didn't check all the photos and clearly didn't read the entire listing. As I said before, we've had even people asking for measurements and the measurements are in the listing. So yeah, so we actually now put in this little kind of sentence saying, condition, please check. And I've done this with authenticity as well, because we do sell a lot of like luxury stuff. Please check all the photos and make sure you are completely happy before purchasing. So that is for the condition, but also with the authenticity as well, because I do add in photographs of all the logos and any sort of labels and things like that that backs up obviously that the item is authentic. So we do put those 2 kind of like almost instructions in the description, saying to people, please check the photos and make sure you are happy before buying. And I'm hoping that, to me, that would say like if they're not happy or if there's things they still have questions about, they'll either go away, which is totally fine. As I said, you want to deter the wrong customer, but it might encourage them, if they do have a question, to actually ask you. And it's actually making me think I could even actually add a little extra bit to that, saying, make sure you're completely happy, please check all the photos before purchasing, and if you do have any questions about any of this stuff, please ask us before purchasing. And you might think it's silly to maybe have to say that to people, but as I said before, we've had people very clearly not reading the description when it comes to the measurements. They've actually asked us questions for the measurements, and I always say back to them, the measurements are in the description, however, here they are again, just so that it's maybe just, reminding them, giving them a little hint, please go and read the description before you buy it, because I don't want you being unhappy with anything else to do with the item. So yeah, I think that's just something that you can do to kind of cover your back, and obviously avoids any customers asking you unnecessary questions, but also, they're very clear on the information on the item, hopefully, and it's encouraging them when they do read the description to then look at the photos, or hopefully vice versa. But inevitably, you'll always still get people who don't look at the pictures properly and who don't read the description, they just buy it, and then they maybe complain about something later. It's still going to happen, but hopefully it will reduce the amount of times that it does happen. I'm actually just sitting here editing this week's video, and there was something that I forgot to mention. Obviously, small businesses, I do like to share other things that other small businesses are doing. So one of James's family members has actually started an online business selling candles. So I'm just going to go and grab the candle because I really want you to share it, and I am somebody who loves candles. And I'll share what they're called. Is it here? It's called Neon Noir, that's the name of the brand, and the scent that we got sent was After Dark. Now they don't know that I'm sharing this or anything, I just wanted to because, as I said, I do like sharing other small businesses that are starting to grow, and as that's what we're doing, you know, for our sort of channel and things, I always think it's nice to share that stuff. So it's called Neon Noir. I'm sure the website is Neon Noir UK, and they do some really nice scents. They've got like ones that have got, I can't remember what the names are, one with rose in it, another one with amber in it, I'm sure. This one's called After Dark. It's really nice and cozy smelling. That's probably the nicest, sort of the best way that I can describe it. And the scent fills the entire living room. So yeah, just wanted to share those. So the next reason why a buyer might ghost you is they have changed their mind about buying from you, but they feel awkward telling you. So this is like a very, I suppose, if people are a bit, yeah, they don't like saying no. And I don't know if this is more of a thing in the UK, because I've been watching people in the US being on Vinted, and it seems like they've got a very different attitude to buying and selling. They're quite upfront and they'll just say, oh, sorry, no thank you, I found one elsewhere, thank you though. Like, they're quite clear. Whereas I do think here, you don't like saying no to people. You don't want to either annoy people or disappoint them or have that awkward kind of message of, oh, how do I tell them I'm not interested anymore, or I don't want it, or I found a different one elsewhere, or I've changed my mind, whatever the reason is. So I do think a lot of the time people just don't like having to be put in that awkward situation of saying no to someone, even though it's over Vinted messages and even though most sellers won't have a problem with it. So yeah, I think that's definitely another reason that people just would rather avoid having that awkward conversation. So another reason that you may be getting ghosted on Vinted by your customers is because they are waiting on something. So what I mean by this is that they're maybe waiting on payday. So if it's kind of close to the end of the month, they might be waiting until they get paid before they go ahead and purchase something. I've done that before, and I've waited, and I haven't really wanted to say to the seller, because it's not really their business, oh, I'm waiting on payday before I buy it. I'll just kind of, if it's still available, I'll buy it. That could be a reason. They could be waiting on an offer. So I know a lot of people who they'll favourite something and then they'll wait a few days and see if either the price gets discounted or if they get sent an offer, and then they'll buy it. So they could be waiting on an offer. That's kind of why they're not really responding to you. They could also be waiting on, maybe just say they've messaged a different seller about the same item and they're comparing two. They might be waiting on the response from this other seller, so then they've got all their information, so then they can make their decision. So there's that as well. So there's quite a few different reasons why you might be getting ghosted. However, I do want to bring up as well that something to be aware of when there are times where the buyer is being a little bit unreasonable and kind of, obviously as sellers, most of us want to be, helpful to customers. We want to try and make as many sales as possible. So we will make, little, not saying exceptions, but we will try and help them as much as possible. So whether it's through trying to meet them in the middle with an offer, trying to reserve an item if they've requested it for payday, those kind of things. Obviously, we do try and do that as well as much as possible, and I'm sure other sellers do as well. However, do be aware of, so that people don't take the mick out of you. So things like that would be, again, like how I mentioned about the reserving an item. If you've been asked to reserve an item, make sure that you have a clear end date for that so that you're comfortable with. So obviously after 5 days it gets unreserved by Vinted anyway, but if you're not happy reserving it for 5 days, tell the customer that and say, look, I'm happy to reserve it for 24 hours, I'm happy to reserve it for 2 days, whatever. Be super clear with them so that you both know, and nobody gets annoyed or anything or feels disappointed, and so that you don't feel like they're taking the mick out of you as well. So I think being helpful, but being aware that they don't push it too far. The same with offers and things. Only accept an offer that you're comfortable with, or only give an offer that you're comfortable with. Don't feel like you have to keep on going just to get the sale. And if they're being, unreasonable and things like that, either, say that to them or just decline the offer. And obviously then there's a situation where you might be spending ages answering a customer's questions and then nothing. Obviously that is very frustrating, and it can be a little bit tricky figuring out how the best way is to deal with that. And I suppose that leads into the question of, if you have been messaging a customer and they do ghost you, should you follow up? And I do feel like this is quite a controversial kind of topic, because some buyers might appreciate it because they've maybe forgotten, or they've maybe, you know, they just need that little extra kind of like push to kind of go and buy something. And some buyers will absolutely hate it and will feel like you're pestering them and that you're almost like being that kind of annoying salesperson that's trying to really push a sale. I know for us, if a customer asks a question, we answer it, and I just kind of say at the end, let me know if you've got any other questions, thanks, and I leave it there. I don't really push or follow up or anything like that. The only time that I'll maybe message is if a customer has reserved something, it's come to the end of the reservation and they haven't bought it yet. I don't actually even say to them, do you still want to buy it? I just say to them, I just let them know that it's not reserved anymore, and if they do want to purchase it, it's available to buy. So I don't even do that, but obviously that's just my preference, because that's just kind of how I do my messages and things. Obviously it's totally fine to say to a customer, just to give them that last little chance if they do want to buy it before you take it off being reserved. I don't think that's been annoying, because they've obviously asked to reserve it. So they've shown a genuine interest, they've given the impression that they were really, you know, are going to buy it. So I don't think that's annoying. But messaging people repeatedly, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. So obviously if a customer sends an offer and you accept, if you send them an offer and they accept, I mean, you could put in a little message. I know we've done this in the past as well, where they've sent an offer, they've accepted it, or we've accepted it, and the only last stage is them paying for it. We'll kind of say, oh, you know, if you are still wanting it and you pay for it, we can get it posted out tomorrow, because we do sort of try and post out kind of the sort of next day of it being sold. So we do send a message like that, but we don't send a message kind of saying, are you going to buy it? Are you still interested? Are you still going to buy it? You've accepted the offer. We don't send anything like that. We just kind of say, if you make payment or if you pay for it, we can do this. So I feel like it's a little reminder, but I don't feel it's being too pushy. And then if they don't respond to us after that message, we just leave it. And obviously then when it comes to if they're just asking questions about the item, as I said before, we don't even really push a sale at all, to be quite honest with you. We just sort of answer the questions, let them know to ask if they've got any more questions, and leave it there. Yeah, so I think, yeah, it depends on the situation. So let me know in the comments, what do you think sellers should do? Should they follow up if you have been messaging as a buyer, if you've made an offer, if you've reserved an item and then the buyers then ghosted them? Should sellers follow up and just kind of message them? Does it depend on the scenario, or should sellers just completely back off and completely leave it with the buyer? And the next thing I wanted to talk about was, are sellers actually making this kind of situation worse, where buyers ghost us? So this could be due to a lot of things, and this is kind of why I sort of made our last video about improving our listings. You know, if we've got unclear photographs, if we've got certain areas of the item not photographed, if there's things like measurements missing, if we've got things like condition not being very clear. I actually had a comment on our last video really talking about measurements, so I definitely think that's an important thing, but also about the material. So if the label is too, because a lot of the time it's quite small, they mentioned, or quite blurry when people take pictures of the care instructions and the sort of label that has the materials on it. So even writing that in your description, that could really help. So if there's any of this kind of information missing, this could also result in people ghosting you, because they might sort of show interest in the item, they might message you about it, but then when they do have a closer look at the listing, whether it's the photographs or whether it's the description, they might then think, there's a lot of unanswered questions there, and before I go ahead and buy it, there's too many things I don't know. So they just can't, again, going back to they can't be bothered. People are lazy, and again, not just buyers, but everybody's like this, and it's true. People, their time's valuable, so they just ghost and just move on and don't, and then start looking elsewhere. So I do think sometimes, maybe our listings are a little bit to do with this, and that's actually why we've been really trying to reduce as many questions as possible within our listings, and so that there's not as many unanswered questions. So I think the biggest lesson to be learned about this is that just because a customer shows interest in something doesn't mean they're intending on buying it. And I think that's something that as sellers, and not just online sellers, but any sort of business where you're selling something, we need to understand that just because a customer is asking lots of questions because they want to learn more about the item doesn't mean that they're going to buy. as I said before, it's really important for them to ask these questions because it helps deter the wrong customer that you don't want, because you don't want an unhappy customer, and it helps you find the right customers. So I think that is something that is really important to understand as a seller, and that's something that we've had to learn as well, because obviously at the very beginning we did think that, oh, they're asking all these questions, they're sending offers, they've accepted an offer, this means they're definitely going to buy, and actually it doesn't. Until that person actually pays money for something, they've not bought it yet. And they, as I say, there are all these different reasons why they could not be buying. I'd love to know in the comments below, as a Vinted seller, what's the strangest kind of situation where you've ever been ghosted by a buyer? Did they ask lots of questions? You know, did they make a reservation? Did they make an offer? All that kind of stuff. Let me know in the comments below. And I'd also kind of like to hear from a buyer's point of view, if you've done this, because I know I have. If you've ghosted a seller, what are the reasons why? Is it simply that you found something elsewhere and you're just too busy to message them, which is totally fine? Or are there other things that the seller is doing that is making you not message them back, making you ghost them? I'd love to hear in the comments below. So if you found this video useful or interesting, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for any of our future videos, and I'll see you in our next one. Bye!